Yo, what's up with the digging down? It's your boy Joe here, trying and failing to stay relevant to a young audience. Like Madonna, basically. Welcome to my second part of my Pokémon Versus Digimon comparison. If you haven't seen last week's, go watch that first. It's all about the anime and just explains what this whole series is all about. So pause this, go watch that. Okay, if you're carrying on watching, I'm assuming you've seen part 1, which is great because we're going to go straight ahead into part 2, the Pokémon and Digimon games. The Pokémon games series began in 1996 with Japanese releases of Red and Green, which came to the West as Red and Blue. As I've mentioned multiple times now, Pokémon is the second biggest selling games franchise of all time, so it's more than likely you know how it goes. You leave home, choose a starter Pokémon, travel across the land, get the gym badges, catch and evolve your Pokémon, defeat an evil team, become the champion, and fill out your Pokédex. You could carry up to 6 Pokémon in a team. Each Pokémon could learn up to 4 moves, and there was an elemental rock, paper, scissors factor in place to give the game strategy. It's a tried and tested formula that's worked for nearly 20 years. Pokémon encourage playing with friends, not only for battling, but trading monsters exclusive to each version for that sweet dex completion. Being on the Game Boy handheld meant that you could play anywhere, on the bus or at school, until the teachers banned them. How do teachers even deal with kids and their phones nowadays? It's just beyond me. Although the games didn't follow the storyline of the anime, certain things did cross over. Important characters like the professors and gym leaders and landmarks like Mount Moon appeared in both. You're not playing as Ash, but as an avatar representing yourself. And although you didn't travel with human companions, you and Ash were going on the same journey. So you watched the anime to see how Ash was doing compared to you, and to help visualise the Pokémon world in ways their handheld graphics couldn't. Digimon started off as a Tamagotchi-like toy line called V-Pets, but the first video game to hit the West and take off was Digimon World. Unlike Pokémon, this game was for the Sony PlayStation, helping solidify the differences between these rival franchises. Digimon World took the virtual pet concept to the next level. You had to look after your Digimon by letting it sleep, feeding it enough, and making sure it doesn't itself here, there and everywhere. But instead of tiny pixels on the screen, you had a large island with detailed pre-rendered backgrounds and 3D models to explore. While the raising of your partner Digimon was much more involved than Pokémon, the battles were a lot more detached. You couldn't really control your monster bar shouting commands and hoping your monster would pull it off at the right time. You had a random chance of learning new skills by watching an enemy perform it, and the mechanics of elemental matchups and evolution aren't well explained or implemented. Story-wise, the game was completely separate from the anime, with the monsters and the name File Island being the only things to cross over. You have to explore this island to bring back Digimon to their senses and get them to rejoin the city, and as you progress, you'll watch it go from bare to populated, with defeating the final boss and getting a full city being your ultimate goals. You couldn't name the protagonist, but he wasn't silent, so he didn't feel as much of a player avatar as they did in Pokémon. But it's that Tamagotchi-like interaction with the Digimon that really pulls you in. You could even take your memory card to a friend's house so your Digimon could fight theirs. Both Digimon World and the original Pokémon games had laid really solid foundations for sequels to add upon, whilst figuring out what didn't work and making those bits better. I'm only going to go into depth with the first 2 sequels of both franchises, because if you've seen last week's episode, you'll probably know where this is going. Pokémon Gold and Silver marked the beginning of what is called a new generation of Pokémon games. Each new generation brings with it a new region to explore, with new characters and monsters all in one go, along with advancements to the overall mechanics. Gold and Silver added new types to help balance the broken metagame, genders of Pokémon and player characters, breeding so you had more of each Pokémon to trade, a time system that affected who appeared where, and so much more. The games were also backwards compatible, meaning the Pokémon you caught in Red, Blue and Yellow could be used in Gold and Silver. These additions were so well liked that when the next games, Ruby and Sapphire, came out for GBA, with no day and night, only a handful of older Pokémon to catch and no backwards connectivity, fans were angry. The franchise was facing a backlash at this time, as it was, as all major fans do, and this misstep did not help. But, as a testament to just how clever Nintendo and Game Freak are, they turned this negative into a way to sell us some GameCube games and remakes of the originals. Day and Night has since been re-implemented, and every Pokémon caught in Ruby and Sapphire can be transferred to every main series game released since then, even if you've got to jump through a few hoops to do so. Nintendo and Game Freak have made sure the main series of games keeps progressing as it goes through the generations. They keep the elements that work and fix the ones that don't, whilst certain gimmicks only exist in specific games because of their themes or to give them something exclusive. Also, the games are released in cycles, so you'll get a pair of games starting off the new generation, then a director's cut third game or a pair of sequels, as well as the occasional pairs of remakes. It's not difficult to see just how tightly managed the main Pokémon games are. Now let's talk about Digimon, where the word tight can only be applied to the budget. The Digimon World series is a series in name only. These games are connected to each other very loosely. It's easier to compare Digimon World to Final Fantasy. Each numbered entry takes place in a different universe, with recurring monsters and characters in different roles and appearances, and the RPG mechanics varying wildly. Barring a few missteps here and there, this usually works fine for Final Fantasy. The mechanics may differ, but they're usually solid, and the polish and the things that are important to the DNA of the Final Fantasy series are always there. Digimon, on the other hand, just sort of throws shit at the wall and sees what sticks. So whilst Digimon World 1 had a strong Tamagotchi / single player RPG story blend, Digimon World 2 was a f***ing roguelike. Now, roguelikes are dungeon crawlers filled with nasty traps and extremely limited inventories, where one wrong move could end your entire game. It's safe to say roguelikes are really only played by the very hardcore, and not kids. You know, Digimon's target market. Gone is the looking after and bonding with your pet. The new digivolving mechanics require you to be constantly DNA digivolving and de-evolving and evolving again. Basically, you get weaker to get stronger. That's a lot of grinding and trial and error gameplay. Remember, Digimon is a franchise for kids. There's no wonder this one didn't make it to Europe. Digimon World 3 is a bit more similar to your standard RPG formula, but once again the developers made it far too complicated for anyone but the really hardcore to enjoy. There are huge difficulty spikes, tons of grinding, and a plot that makes you backtrack and forth all over the place just to pad the game out. And in battles there's no real strategy either, other than level up, constantly spam your strongest attack and hope that it's you and not the enemy who gets lucky with a random block in. The only challenge here is to your patience. Remember, Digimon is a franchise for kids. These games don't have much in common at all, except for a belief that spending hours fighting enemies to slowly level up is something that children enjoy. At least the Digimon World games on DS actually feel like they're related to each other. And then you do some research and you find out that in Japan, the DS games are actually called the Digimon Story series, which is pretty cheeky of the localization team. It was also pretty cheeky of them to get a Digimon game out on DS before Diamond and Pearl, but in typical Digimon fashion, these games didn't really set the world on fire. Interestingly enough, the Digimon World series did eventually return to that style of the original, with a PSP game called Digimon World Redigitized that let you make your monster look fabulous. It was never released in the West. The 3DS got a port of this game called Redigitized Decode that added a ton of new content. It was never released in the West. I won't go into too much details for the spin-offs for either franchise, but I will say that both Pokemon and Digimon have churned out some utter crap in their time. You kind of expect it from Digimon, to pump out a crappy kart racer or a low-budget Smash Brothers clone rather than localizing the games that the fans really want. It's a lot more disheartening to see Pokemon put out stuff like Pokemon Channel or Pokemon Dash because the main series is so consistently great. Occasionally you do get the odd great spin-off like Conquest or Pokemon Snap, the best game of all time. There's also the upcoming Pokken Tournament that looks really good. And of course, there's the Mystery Dungeon series. You see, the Mystery Dungeon games are roguelikes. Like Digimon World 2. The difference here is that the developers clearly knew their audience and made this spin-off easy and accessible for kids. Probably the most notable Digimon spin-off is the Adventure/Tamers series. These games follow one character named Ryo, who appears in both the Adventures and Tamers seasons of the anime. The story told across this series explains how the anime is actually all connected, and despite being in English, was never released in the West. Overall, I think it's pretty easy to see how Pokémon has left Digimon in the dust. Final Fantasy proves that you can switch things up game by game, but you need to make sure that if you're going to do that everything comes together. A lot of Digimon games fall into the trap of confusing padding and excessive grinding with added value, and thinking depth means that players need a guide just to understand the mechanics. The Pokémon games are full of NPCs and signs to explain everything that you need to know, and while catching them all is a big time sink that can require a lot of grinding, it's nowhere near as repetitive as Digimon. Not to mention the fact that you've got friends who can help you achieve your goal, and there's that competitive element that makes you want to do that. Digimon disappeared into obscurity not because it was a Pokémon clone, but because it didn't know what it wanted to be. It wanted to be a kids franchise, but the games weren't accessible to kids, and the creators would rather try new things and see if they worked, rather than sticking with one thing and working on improving it. Digimon is hard to follow because it's constantly switching gears and introducing new universes, while Pokémon established everything from the beginning, and every few years introduces new monsters and laws and mechanics in one go. I could talk about the amount of Digimon palette swaps and evolution lines that just make no sense and change from game to game, but that would be full on nitpicking. The point is, the people in charge of Pokémon have managed to keep things simple and accessible, but also deep and rewarding in terms of both gameplay and the franchise as a whole. It knows its fans, it knows what its fans want, and it knows how to market it. Digimon squandered its appeal as a slightly older and cooler, yet still for kids alternative, by making games for a very niche audience, and worst of all, just not making those games fun. And there you have it, Pokémon Versus Digimon. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was a nice little trip down memory lane for you. If you did like it, please like, subscribe, comment, watch my older videos. They're floating around the screen somewhere. And yeah, anything you can do to help me out is absolutely amazing. I keep saying this, but it's true. I love doing this for you guys, and I love seeing all the positive feedback. So thank you very much. And I'm off to take some cod liver oil and watch Countdown and shout at young people or whatever old folks do now. Bye!